Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, your host, Jason Greenwood. And I have another insightful guest to introduce to you today. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Joshua LAUER to the podcast. Welcome, Joshua.
Thank you. Hi. How's it
going? It's awesome to have you along for the ride with me today. And you are the CEO of LAUER Creations, and you are also a freelance marketing consultant to e-commerce brands. But before we dig into that a little bit more and get into the nitty-gritty of all that, how did you come to be in this world of e-commerce and digital?
That's a great question. It was a long ride. So most of my 20s, I was actually I went to college for guitar, believe it or not. And I was trying to write songs, living in my parents' basement. And eventually I got like a Rolling Stone magazine, and there was an ad for a program in internet marketing. And I decided it'd be nice if I could do a little bit more than pay bills for my parents' basement. Went back to school, finished that program in 2012, basically got a internship out of college at a company called Ackman and Dickinson, and they did a lot of like WordPress sites. They had a WordPress shop. They also had another dev team that did a lot of Ruby on Rails projects. And so within that role, I became like the default guy in-house for doing the analytics and all the technical like SEO optimizations. So the technical things that the marketing people would care about. And then from there, after about 4 years at that company, I went to a company called Lead Pages. They had just acquired another company called Drip around that time. Drip would end up rebranding to an e-commerce CRM over the next few years while I was there. And then ended up working after that place, a gig at another company that was a big e-commerce company, Evereve. And they have like about 100 retail locations throughout the United States. They also have an e-commerce site. And then somewhere in there, we hit the pandemic. I started bounced around at a few other places before I decided it felt like there was more need. Going back to that sort of first place I was where I had companies coming in and out and we were just doing analytics. It felt like there was more need for people I used to work with, just people in my network, that they'd go to a new company and they're like, I need someone that can set up the stuff that you set up for us over at this company. 2022, I started LAUER Creations basically to go full-time freelance with setting up e-commerce tracking, a lot of dashboards, dabble with machine learning type things. And I think some of the stuff that kind of got me to that point was, if you go way back to the beginning, that first place, we'd get all the stuff tracking, and then it'd be like monthly reporting time. And like the whole internet marketing team of this company was basically, and they called it internet marketing back then. I remember throughout those 4 years, it switched to digital marketing. But we would have like the first week of the month, people would just be heads down, putting in all the extra hours, trying to make sure all the accounts had all the reports needed. And I would remember I'd be sitting there working on reports, and the guy next to me starts cussing, and it's, oh, what's going on? This report I was working on for the past 6 hours just crashed in Word, and I lost all my work. And it was like, weren't you saving? But it just felt like there had to be a better way to pull this data, to not have it be so manual. If we could make it automatic, and then at that point we're going, what happened last month, not how long does it take me to figure out what happened last month.
Wow, what a journey. And I think it's similar to a lot of consultants or freelancers or independents like myself, like you, where I had a client. I've been in the industry for 25 years. The last agency that I was in and building, I had clients that wanted to work with me directly. They said, look, we'd like more of your direct time. We'd like to engage directly with you as opposed to having to go through an agency to get time with you. And that formed the foundation of my first client base as an independent consultant. And it sounds like a similar sort of thing to what you went through. You said, look, I could be doing this through an agency, or I could be providing these services directly, have a little bit more freedom, probably not have to work as many hours, be able to pick and choose your clients that you think you can really help move the needle for. And I think a lot of us that want to have more of a lifestyle business, for lack of a better term, this is a great way to go, independent. But in your specific world, what I find interesting is that there has been such a incredible upheaval. If we just look at one thing in isolation, and that's the transition from Universal Analytics, Google Universal Analytics, to GA4, it feels to me very much Google is basically moving to a place where, unless you are a data analyst or a data scientist, you can't really use their tooling anymore. It used to be super user friendly. Back in the day, I was using Google Ads and AdWords and analytics from the very earliest days. And a pleb with just a little bit of online training and a couple of Google Analytics courses and a couple of books, maybe one book, you'd be really good at this and you'd be able to leverage the tool. Now it feels like you have to be dedicated to this space to be able to even implement GA4 successfully. And there's been cries online about this, about how non-user friendly and how opaque GA4 is. And it almost feels like Google's moving in a direction where they're saying, particularly in relation to analytics and Google Ads, just trust us, right? They're saying, look, you don't really need to worry about the data. We'll worry about the data. Just trust us. Just spend a whole lot more money with us, and we'll go and find more customers for you. But then we have an almost secondary cottage industry that has popped up, MTA platforms. We look at Triple Whale, we look at Northbeam. Then we have platforms that can help try to figure out, okay, you pulled this lever. What impact did it have? Where's your money being best spent? Then we have Store Hero-like platforms that plug into like Shopify stores and help you understand some of your unit economics better and contribution margin and things like that a lot of merchants just simply don't understand. And then we have some people who are using independent BI platforms like Power BI to try to create all these custom dashboards that management, and particularly senior management, want to see through the overall financial performance of the business. So I guess I said all that to say that this space has gotten real complex versus the early days, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I feel like what you just mentioned with UA going to GA4, it just reminded me that transition was also one of the things in the back of my mind. I was like, I could probably go full-time freelance just migrating people from UA to GA4 because it's complicated. And I'm not sure if you remember, as Google was starting to roll this out, they called it like app and web before it was GA4. And they also had something called auto track. And that was a point where I was like, oh, am I going to just be irrelevant now because you're going to put this code on the site and it's going to automatically track everything? And I was like both relieved, but also kind of shocked when I saw how awful the auto track stuff was. Scrolls means that somebody scrolled 90% of the way down the page. You might want to know if they made it 25, 50, or 75% of the way, depending on what's there. Another example of scrolling is, I think how far you scroll maybe doesn't matter as much as I may want to know, did you see this new treatment that I just put on the site? How many people saw that? How many people are interacting with that? And so you could estimate with 50% scrolling or something like that, or you could actually do some kind of element visibility tracking where we know that element came into the sort of viewport of the browser. And then another one I was really excited about was downloads, right? Okay, cool. We're going to track anyone that downloads anything. So we've got data about PDFs. The first thing I think, if I've got a website with a handful of PDFs, I think maybe this could be like a B2B site, usually with PDFs, where we have, and they're going to be calling them white papers. And you probably want to know how many people are looking at your white papers. So it's astonishing then when you go into GA and you're like, this is how many downloads we had. But wait, which
Files.
Which file? Yeah, it seems like a basic thing to know. So yeah, so GA4, I really feel like what happened here was, and to bring back the app and web thing for a second, like they had Google Analytics and it was great for websites. And then iOS and Android became a thing, got a lot of popularity. Everyone's got a smartphone. And so now we have apps. We need some kind of analytics for apps as well. But apps are totally different than websites. They can be built by a variety of different tools. And who knows, we have screen views. And then you've got a company like Mixpanel, who I remember them as being one of the first companies to come out and say events everything is an event, basically. Instead of page views, they called page views outdated and old fashioned and all this stuff. And they had a cool feature where you could basically say, I've got 5 events that I think should happen in order, right? And so you pick them out, and then now you have a funnel, right? And so you can look at that funnel and see the drop off. And UA had custom event tracking. And the famous phrases category, action, label, and value were something that I became very familiar with over the years. I started thinking about it like the category was like a hierarchy, right? But this was also a fun thing when you got involved with developers, because the word action to them meant the thing that you did. To me, category was the top level, action was like a subcategory, and label was additional detail because of the way that the interface worked. And so it was fun having conversations with developers that are like, no, it's got to be the action. And I'm okay. So what is that action? What do? You click, right? And then when do you not click? Maybe on your phone you tap something, but we're not distinguishing like whether or not it's a tap or a click or a submit.
Or a hover in the case of desktop, for example.
Yeah, a hover. The action, definitely made more sense as like a hierarchy. And then the beautiful thing about that hierarchy is that you could go to any UA account, and if you were able to pull in category, action, and label, you could really see how whoever did anything custom with it was thinking about things and understand it, because it was all going to live in that area. Today with GA4, everything is an event. That kind of goes to that sort of, we're in the world of like apps. And maybe before I go too far down that, I want to talk about the original version, which was like page view based, right? So UA started off, the web was not super interactive. We didn't have like React interfaces, and Facebook was very young, if it even existed when GA first came out. And basically you would come to a website, you look at a page. There's a link on that page that might take you to another page. And if you went to that next page, there might be another link that would take you to yet another page. And maybe there's a form you fill out. Maybe there's something you're buying. Eventually you end up on maybe a confirmation page or a thank you page. So everything was just a series of page views. And like, I think that sort of paradigm gets a bad rap in today's world with all the sort of data that's taking over, but it still makes a lot of sense. Another thing about page views is that, and with UA, we had this concept of sessions, right? And the session is, I come to the site, I maybe see 6 different pages, I leave the site. Or I come to the site, I look at the first page, I'm like, nope. And then I bounce, and we have bounce rate, right? So we've got all these things. And even before GA, there was this concept of the ultimate was when like we put this out there and it got a lot of hits. That one got 1 million hits, guys. That's a big deal. And it's like, what's a hit? It's just a guy at the door clicking a clicker. It became like, we want to know more than just, did somebody look at this? I remember like some of the early kind of things that people would talk about would be like time on page, time on site. If we can get them to stay like longer than a minute, maybe that's a good thing. But then it became like another kind of question, like how long does it take for someone to actually do the thing you want them to do on your website? Because if it takes longer than that, and you're like optimizing to try to get them to stay longer, are we just making worse experiences? So it's interesting how the data itself changes how you think about what you're doing. And at first it's what can you measure? But then just because you can measure something, you tend to get focused on that. And I think what's that? I forget who said the thing, what gets measured gets moved, something along those lines. I don't remember who originally said that, but it's very real.
Yes.
And so we've got this, there's a handful of like really key reports that I think most marketers are looking for if they came from the UA world, right? And one of the first ones is the channels report, right? So you're a digital marketer, you're spending on Google Ads, Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest, whatever it is, LinkedIn. And you want to see out of those people when they come to the site, are they doing the thing you want them to do? Are there a lot of sessions? Is the bounce rate in a respectable place? And by respectable, we're saying probably under 85% bounce rate is good. If it's 85% or higher, where something's broken. If it's in the 80s, we're still thinking it's not that great. I had one moment where a company, I'm not going to say names, somebody at the company got in front of the whole group and said, we're proud to report that our bounce rate has decreased to 16%. And nobody had talked to me about this before they decided to share it with the company. You might hear that number and be like, oh, that's amazing. Most 80% plus of people that come to the site are doing something. My immediate reaction to that was, oh no, something's not right.
Broken.
Yeah, something's broken in a different way. So basically, again, we had page view. So you load a page, but there may have been something like if there was scroll tracking, and if that scroll tracking was set to a non-interaction versus an interaction event or something like that, all of a sudden you scroll just ever so slightly, and now a second event has come through and you didn't bounce. But what does that really even mean? The whole thing about bouncing in general was one of the more cryptic sort of metrics in universal analytics. And I think it's Avinash Kaushik.
Analytics 2.0.
Yes,
famous.
exactly. He says, I came, I puked, I left, or something like that is his description of bounce rate. Yeah. And really, yeah, you load a page, you do nothing else. That's awful. And so hopefully we can get people to at least do something. But what should that something be?
Is it a meaningful something?
Yes. Is it meaningful? Is it something that moves you further along in our business funnel? And if that's an e-commerce site, maybe you're landing on the homepage. Do we get you to go to a product list page or product description page? Are you able to add to cart, eventually check out? There's usually multiple steps and various funnels. And UA had a variety of funnels for looking at those things. We get used to, like, in the world of UA, we have sessions, we have users, and we have hit level kind of scope, right? And then we get to GA4 and everything becomes events and users, basically. It's like long live the session. Yeah. Although it seems to be coming back. They've been rolling out all sorts of updates. Also, the bounce rate, which debatably wasn't the most helpful metric, although it could help you find out if something was broken pretty quick. That's now engagement rate, which is much more complicated to say. It's like you've visited 2 or more pages, or you completed a conversion event, which is now like a KPI event. We keep changing what we want to call the goals here as if it wasn't confusing enough. And then, yeah, so we get to GA4, and a lot of people that got upgraded or they just signed up for Google Analytics, and Google was like, you're getting the new one because you're signing up for a fresh account. I'd go out networking events, talk to people. Yeah, this company, they're on GA4 now. I can't find anything in there. And that's weird. This guy's pretty smart. He should be able to find his way around in there. And so as I start getting into it, I just was like, wow. And still to this day, they finally have the trend lines where you can plot the rows and you can flip between day, week, and month on the top. But that was missing for, 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. And that was a really useful feature. I've definitely been in a bunch of conversations with executives where if I show them data that's like at the date level, they're like, I can't tell what's going on there. It's too noisy. Can you flip it to week? And it's like, oh yeah, let me press that button in the old world, or I'm gonna have to download that.
A custom report for you, basically.
Yeah. And it gets interesting because the event thing becomes like exciting if you're like a pure data analyst. You're like, I can have an event. I can have whatever properties are associated with that event, and I can track whatever I want to track and whatever details I want to track about that event. And again, most of the time people are like, I installed Google Analytics. We should know the answer to this question because Google Analytics is installed. If you do the basic install, it loads on each page view. So the technology fundamentally is very much similar to what UA was if you don't do anything custom. And so really, to your point earlier, we get to GA4 and it's very much you need to have data skills to configure it. I think furthermore, you need to be used to analyzing the data in a certain way in order to make it so that the data's set up to track in a way that makes sense to you. What PDF did we download? What element came on the screen versus did we see the footer? Does it matter if we saw the footer? And if
we did see the footer, what did we do with that? Like, for example, if we have a contact us link in our footer or we have 20 links in our footer, And 85% of those clicks are, for example, shipping information on an e-commerce website. That's really important information to have, because maybe it means we're not weaving that information in throughout the customer journey enough. So someone is taking the trouble to scroll all the way to the damn foot of our website, and 85% of the time what they're looking for is shipping information and shipping costs. Whereas we're not presenting that on PLPs, we're not presenting that on homepage, we're not presenting that on PDPs, we're not allowing shipping estimating to be happening anywhere except in the cart, and we're not displaying any meaningfully throughout the journey how we even charge for shipping, or if there's even a free shipping threshold. We're not communicating that in a meaningful way. And so somebody's going to the effort of trying to identify that minuscule piece of information wherever it might be on the website, right? And so I think, to your point, if a business doesn't know the things, let's not call it metrics, let's not call it KPIs, let's just say generically, if a business does not know the things that are important to it in order to grow its business, and if they can't communicate that to someone like you, for example, then it makes it difficult for you to even be able to go away and, with your knowledge of the platform, be able to set it up in a way that brings meaningful insights back to the business. And I even see this in my consulting, which is not the analytics side. I even see that when I go in and I do discovery, oftentimes they're saying, hey, how can we use AI, or how can we upgrade our technology stack to make it easier for us to do XYZ? But they don't have a really clear vision of the type of customer experience they're trying to create, or the emotions they're trying to generate inside their customers. And because they don't have that, they are absolutely laser focused on shiny object syndrome. It's the latest buzzword, the latest trend, the latest thing, the latest tech. Let's do that because we think that's going to solve our problems. But if you don't have a strategy of how you want to interact with your customers and why that is special and why that's going to create a special bond between you and that customer, then I think you're just flailing around in the darkness. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah, that the shiny object syndrome made me think of Hello bars and like Wheel of Fortune spinners and
Quiz commerce, basically anything to do with
yeah.
quiz commerce.
Yes. And I think if we look at that for a second, like most of those people are probably trying to grow their email list, because that, according to most of the hype that you find on the internet, is the thing that changed the list growth overnight. But the thing is, if I click to read an article on your website, or if I'm looking at a product on the site and I haven't even had a chance to like see any of that, and now you're like, sign up for 10% off. I'm like, I don't even know if I want to buy this thing yet. And then the option to click away is, no, I don't like discounts. I'm like, it's not that I don't like discounts. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. And so you're like asking me to make a decision about whether or not I'm going to buy when I haven't had a chance to figure that out yet. Or maybe it's a news site, and then we've got just, they make money off of various ad placements. So we've got ad takeovers that are happening before I've even finished reading the first sentence. And so, yeah, those kinds of things, they will increase numbers in your sort of, maybe in your analytics tool. But then when we get down to like, how did that email campaign last month do at driving whatever promo we were pushing? And it's, our unsubscribe rate's higher than it's ever been. The open rate was probably looked good because of all the tools that open things now for you to make sure there's no spam, but there weren't that many clicks.
And there were hardly any conversions, for example, which is ultimately the thing that matters.
And so, yeah, so like the ultimate thing is, if the goal is to sell more products on your website, get out of the person's way, right? Like, you've got a site, you spent a lot of time putting it together. It does a good job at showcasing products, and hopefully you've got a decent like filtering solution interface. I think if you look at e-commerce sites today, probably the biggest place where you could say universally that almost every single e-com site screws things up is on their filters and on their sort. So it would be awesome if we saw developers focusing on those things. But certainly, like, we want to look at, are you looking at the product? Are you adding it to the cart? Are you making it to checkout? Are you completing the process? And afterwards, I just bought the product, right? And I'm excited. I can't wait for it to arrive. It's going to take 5 to 7 days to ship, depending on what options I selected at checkout. And yet 20 minutes after I buy, I get this email about, asking for me to leave a review. And I'm like, I don't even have the product yet. And so all those things happening at different cadences, I think, are a side effect of the allure of marketing automation to an extent, but it's also a side effect of not using the data when you have the chance to use the data. So if you know that your shipping takes 5 to 7 days, why not just like double that number and wait 14 days to ask for a review? They've at least hopefully had the product in their hands by then and had a chance to play around with it, just as one example. Yeah, I guess whether it's an e-commerce site, whether it's a B2B site, I tend to think there's pretty much kind of two scenarios for the most part. On B2B, most businesses are looking for your information because they want to have a conversation with you. They want to get you into their sales reps to qualify you, to get you to an account executive, to try to sell you something if it makes sense. So there's a big qualification thing happening there. And on that side, you've got, maybe there's a, like, the whole like Salesforce world is another kind of interesting one where who knows if any Salesforce accounts operate the same way. But generally speaking, you want marketing qualified leads to become sales qualified leads to turn into opportunities. So we have these kind of funnels, right? But if the marketing team says, I'm supposed to get X amount of leads this month, what incentive do they have to like filter people out? They don't really. So tying what you do to the bottom line, I think is important. But I think it's also important to have metrics associated with the top of the funnel as well, right? So if you're not getting the exposure that you need, then you're not going to see the bottom of the funnel flowing as much, right? So it's kind of interesting because now if we get into sort of the ad world, right? Say Google Ads or Facebook or whatever, like you're going to have some conversion events that you send to them. And those conversion events, if we're talking about forms, they're just probably lead events, right? If we're talking about e-commerce, it's going to be probably a purchase event, probably also an add to cart, because if you add to cart and you don't purchase, then we can do an abandoned cart campaign, those kinds of things. And these events are like, most of the time you go into your account and you're going to say, I want to optimize towards this. And so it's not as common today for people to optimize towards like the CPC world made it so everyone's paying for clicks. But I think there's value in impressions in the right place with the right audience. And to an extent, I think probably most things that we have that we love today, that whatever products we like to buy, at some point in our life, we didn't know about those brands, right? And I think it's hard once you know about something to remember what it was like to not know about it. But that's the kind of the journey that we really want to understand, right? Like when you're a business and you're trying to grow your business and trying to find new customers, not only new customers, but you want people that are be like really happy that they found you because you want them to come back and keep buying what you're putting out there. We all have that sort of weird aversion to like the sleazy, like used car salesman, right? But we might also have an experience with some salesperson where we were like, this guy wasn't pressuring me. He seemed to want to get to know me. He seemed to want to understand what my problems were. And he really seemed to want to help me arrive at the right solution. Or maybe there's the dentist that says, you don't have to do that crown today. You can put that off for a little while. Whatever. People like it when someone's looking out for you. And when it's not just, I'm trying to get a quick sale, I have this metric and I need to move the needle on it. And so I think when it comes to data, like that's a really important thing. You've got all these like different data points you can collect, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. To an extent, what are you going to do with that data? Right. And so if you remember the big data craze, that was probably 10 years ago by now, like where all these companies are like, well, you can just track everything. We'll just grab it all. I remember a point where even if you use Google Tag Manager to track things, you can obviously you deploy Google Analytics there. There's a little trigger that says all pages. It fires on every page. That's how it's supposed to work. But then there's also this like trigger that's for click events. And you could literally track every single click event. And so let's say you do that. Like, how do we know if that click event was on a key element? Like, it depends on what you tracked with it. Do we throw the entire element that was clicked on into some kind of field? And then if we do, this is code. So now you've got like probably a marketing team that's going to open up your analytics and be like, I see 100 clicks on button class equals li dash aria dash, and you're like, I don't know what that means. And so we do not want to track everything. What we want to track is what matters, right? Think about the radio when you're turning the dial, if anyone still uses a radio. The old school radios, you turn the dial and you get a bunch of static, and then all of a sudden you tune into a radio station. And that's a signal that you can interpret and understand. And so we should have the same kind of thing going on with our data. So if there's a new treatment that you're launching on the website, maybe you want to understand, are people clicking on this button? Maybe we scroll left and right for some reason because there's a carousel. Are they doing that? Did they click the images? Do they actually click the headings? And these things can help you understand like the user experience, and you can track those things and compare them to other experiences on the website to determine, do these seem like they help the person achieve the goal that you're trying to get them to achieve. But yeah, it's very important to think like what actually matters here. If they do this, it doesn't matter. I remember another account where it was a big fitness company and they had hero images on the site, as most sites do, and there's like a button there that you can click on. And it was like one of those websites where like you've got like a little margin on either side because there's like a max width. And the person in charge of the project was like, I know people are going to click in those margins. Let's track that. And I'm like, okay, I can track that. But why does that matter? So you can say that they clicked in the margin because you thought they were probably clicking in the margin. What is that going to do for your business? Also, if you have enough traffic and if you're using Google Analytics, you might be concerned about hitting various limits, right? So there is a limit on what you can do with Google Analytics on a free account. GA4, one of the cool things about it that you didn't get with UA is that you can send all the data to BigQuery, and then now you can query it yourself, and you can make your own attribution models if you know what you're doing, and that's cool. So I've actually spent a lot of time trying to queries that make the session attribution more similar to how it was in Universal Analytics. GA4 has data-driven attribution, which is also a cool thing, but I think that people are still used to the last click that they thought was happening in UA, which turns out it's not actually just last click, it's last non-direct click. And so that was a whole other kind of thing where if you're used to analyzing it like this and then suddenly just switch to this way, now you think that certain things have dropped when they really haven't dropped. And you get to a point where you've got multiple years of anything happening. Those year-over-year comparisons are pretty important, especially for larger businesses. So being able to say this comparison is one-to-one to what it was, even though we've switched analytics platforms, we might have switched to a different e-commerce platform. Everything has changed underneath, but yet we're still able to paint this picture together.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the saying that analytics without empathy is vanity, right? At the end of the day, because if I'm KPI'd on a certain thing, like on number of clicks or dwell time on a page or an element or what, like I can structure my website to hit those targets, and I can structure my analytics and tracking to hit those. If what we're trying to achieve is so separated from the type of customer experience we're trying to create, that they're disconnected, right, from reality effectively. That's why I think that for me, like I've got GA4 installed on my WordPress website, not my WordPress website, sorry, my Squarespace website. And I look at it once every 6 months if I'm lucky. But what is more meaningful to me is clarity, right? So Microsoft Clarity. So I've got the Clarity tag.
Yeah.
And I look at that almost every single day because I actually watch the sessions. I watch customers click around my website. I watch what they click on. I watch what they click on next. I watch where they hold their cursor. I watch whether they listen to one of my podcast episodes from the podcast page embed. I'm actually trying to look at my website through their eyes. That's how I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to say, is there something I could do to my website that's going to make this a better experience for them? screw whether it's turning into more conversions for me. If I make a better website experience, the default consequence will be that they will most likely want to do more business with me. But if it's frustrating from the moment they land to the moment they leave, then my chances of doing business with them are really low. And so I think that we get, and this is an industry-wide problem. This is not just an analytics problem. I think empathy is just lacking. Full stop. So when I'm inside these businesses, it's almost always inward focused. It's how can we convert more? How can we sell more? How can we? So the baseline of questions is always internally focused, right? It is almost never externally focused. How can we help our customers more? How can we give them a better experience? How can we educate them better? How can we entertain them better? How can we create a better self-service experience for them? How can we make their life better? And I just think that if you ask better questions, you will get better answers. But the problem is that most businesses are so freaking selfish that they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. That's just what I see. And I've been doing this for 25 years. And I would say that greater than 90% of the businesses I've ever had anything to do with, they are so inwardly focused that they are completely blind to what their customers' wants and needs are. And therefore, they get so caught up in the analytics, they get so caught up in the data, and they get so caught up in these esoteric data points that they've lost any semblance of big picture thinking at all in the business.
Yeah.
And they get so granular with things that they can't see the forest for the trees. That's what I see. And when I go in, one of the first things that I ask my clients when I'm doing B2B consulting is, have you even had discussions with your customers? Have you said, what are 1, 2, 3 things you love about doing business with us? And what are 1, 2, 3 things that you hate about doing business with us, or really frustrating about doing business with us? Because in the B2B world, these are long-term relationships. High AOVs and high LTVs are built in to the relationship. They're going to be doing business with you unless you royally screw things up. They're going to be doing business with you for years. That's just the nature of B2B, right? And if they haven't done that customer research and they haven't had those nuanced discussions with customers, I advocate that, hey, look, then I'll come in and I'll help you lead those discussions, because I don't want to be architecting something that is just helping you, because we will get zero adoption if that's our focus, right? We need your customers to want to adopt these experiences in order for you to get any semblance of ROI out of these investments. So I'd rather you spend $0 until we know where that money should actually be spent to improve the experience. And if you have no opinion on the kind of customer experience that you want to create, then we should probably be forming one based on some serious customer input before we ever get into scoping, before we ever select a technology, before we ever consider integration architecture, before we even think about any of that stuff. And I don't know if you see this too. Almost every single business that I speak to says they are customer-centric. They say, hey, we're customer-centric, but they haven't operationalized that customer centricity in any meaningful way. And until you operationalize customer centricity, to me, it's only words, right? So until you are creating meaningful opportunities for your customers to create a feedback loop with you outside of just the products you're selling them, until you create that environment where they feel safe enough to be able to tell you the things they don't like about doing business with you, and then you meaningfully take steps to eliminate those pains, then I actually don't think you give a shit about your customers, because you've never asked them what matters to them.
Right.
There's a lot of assumptions going on, is what I'm saying. There's a lot of assumptions going on out there.
Yeah. I think you reminded me of another, I can't remember who said this. Another quote that sits in my head is, analytics can tell you the what, but not necessarily the why. It might have been Avinash that said that one.
Yes.
But yeah, and I think like he's got some cool ideas around various on-site surveys you can do, kind of saying, were you able to do what you wanted to do on the site today? Yes or no? If not, why? And the sort of open-ended ways to collect that data. And I've certainly been on a number of sort of rabbit holes where a particular client notices something in their analytics and they're going, what happened? Why did this happen? And I'm, as much as you can dig in, like, the why always turns into, in those situations, like, is there a promotion I don't know about? Is there something out there? Or back in the day of UA, we had a lot of analytics spam that would come through.
Yeah,
So there's
robot
less of
spam,
that.
basically.
Yeah. But yeah, certainly another thing that contrasts your point there about internal versus external. I find that when a lot of companies do want to go more external, it doesn't necessarily go to the customer, it goes to the competitor. What are our competitors doing? And I think for anyone that's like early in their career, competitive analysis is a double-edged sword that you should be very careful with, because if you're reporting up to somebody who makes decisions and you say 9 out of 10 of our competitors do it like this and ours is different, so therefore we should bring our site up to the current times, do what the competitors are doing, there's one of two ways that can go. One is the person you're talking to says, oh, thank you, that's a great insight, and yeah, we should do that, if they like the idea. If they don't like the idea, they're like, actually, we need to differentiate ourselves in the market, so we're going to keep doing it the way we've been doing it. And so that's a funny way that competitive analysis can
It
hurt
can
more than it
rapidly
helps.
devolve into Me
Yeah,
Tooism.
yep.
And
Yeah.
therefore we have zero differentiation in the market as a result. Now, there's such a thing as good differentiation and bad differentiation. So you want to make sure that it's good differentiation, but certainly I think looking at the data will tell you that. So when you first go in, so a customer comes to you and they say, hey, look, we used to do UA. We need to make the transition to GA4. We don't have a data analyst or a data scientist on staff. So we're not even sure if we did implement GA4 and we implemented GA4 correctly, are we actually going to get any value out of that? Because let's just say hypothetically, I don't know what your numbers are, but let's say you say I charge 10 grand to do a full end-to-end audit and a GA4 implementation and a tagging guide for your developers and all that sort of. Let's just say hypothetically the engagement is 10 grand, and they go, look, that's fine. 10 grand is reasonable, but how will that bring more actionable insights to our business so that we can operationalize those insights and actually make genuine improvements to our customer experience as a result? Or perhaps get better conversion rates, or perhaps get lower bounce rates, or perhaps, I look at those metrics. I look at bounce rates, conversion rates, etc., as just simply a lagging indicator of you creating a better experience for your customers. That's all it is. So the reality is, in and of themselves, that data is meaningless. But in the context of, okay, over time, if I make the customer experience overall better, then hopefully those metrics will be moving trend-wise in the right direction. So when you first go in, what are the typical 1, 2, 3 things that you tell your potential new clients you need to do first to level set before we go in and we try to implement this flashy new analytics system?
Yeah, it usually starts. So people tend to be approaching me. So usually I'm getting somebody's reaching out because they've been spending money somewhere and they're having a hard time justifying it. Maybe they believe it's working, but like the numbers aren't showing it's working. Or they are new to a company, they've got XYZ budget. There's been a half a dozen different developers on the site in the past 2 or 3 years. They don't even know how to get in touch with the one that built the thing, whatever it is. And so I think it's working, but I'm not really sure. I can usually, before I get on a call with someone, if I know what the website they share what the site is, I can open it up and look at the network tab in the dev tools and see what's going on, to get a sense of, is this, without having access to your analytics at all, does it look like stuff is tracking? And then usually at that point, if we're like, we're going to move forward on an audit, like the thing we're looking at is getting access to the analytics to be like, when you pull data from here, what are you looking at? What's coming in your reports? Then I unpack or dig into like the goals. How are these configured? Is this one a thank you page goal? A lot of times the thank you page goals and the funnels, especially in UA. If you ever made a funnel in UA where it starts with a destination goal and you add 3 steps to it, those steps do not determine if the final like thing happens, even if you say that the funnel is required.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's things like that. I had an account. I actually learned that because I was working on an account and they had 5 different ways to get to the same place. And I set up all these different funnels in UA. And then I went to look at them after we collected data for a month and all the goals were the same. And I was like, this doesn't seem
How's
right.
that possible?
And it was because literally, as long as that destination URL fires, that goal fires.
Oh,
So there's little nuances like that where somebody went in there. Usually it's somebody that, like to your point in the beginning, read a book, has a basic understanding. They found a few things and they clicked. Or like another classic one is if you learn about UTMs, tagging traffic that's coming to your website, somebody goes, I want to track this button, click, we'll put a UTM on there. But now if you sent people from Google Ads to your site and they click on that button and it says that they came from the button.
Not the ad. Yeah.
So it's quite common that there's some kind of like misunderstanding in how this stuff actually works. And that's why the numbers are misleading. Certainly there's a chance that I get into your account and it's, oh, actually this is tracking correctly and the numbers that you're looking at are just awful. That's pretty rare, to be honest, but I wouldn't say that it's impossible. Though the analytics is not the structure, right? It's not the house. It's not the website. So most businesses have focused on the website, the functionality, and then the tracking comes afterwards. And that's where, depending on how the site was coded, it may or may not track the way that we think it should. A lot of sites will have, this is my site, but I collect some kind of information for like registrations or signups or whatever. And I use a third party for that. And there's like an iframe involved. And so then you can't tell.
That's not being tracked. There's not any cross-domain tracking on the subdomain or anything like that.
Yeah. And stuff like that. As an example, let's say you have a form that's embedded with an iframe, because that's pretty common. The iframe has no idea where you came from. So one thing you could do is if you have UTM parameters on the landing page where that iframe is embedded, you could pass the UTMs to the iframe, assuming you have GA on both of them. That may or may not be the best idea, but it would at least help you understand when that form's submitted, what happened there. Another option is you've got the page usually knows who sent you. So there's something in the browser called the document referrer. Most analytics tools use referral information to figure out how people got to the site if they're not using UTMs. So if you have a form and an iframe and you know that it was like landing page B, just to make it easy, that came from, you might also say, I'm only going to use landing page B in my Facebook ads. So then at that point, you would know if they came from the form that was connected to that or that it had that refer in it, that likely came from your Facebook ads. So there's different ways to solve some of these problems. And oftentimes, the tech that has been selected comes with its own limitations because those people were trying to solve for what the thing
A different
does,
problem, probably.
and not how to track it. Yeah. And quite often, though, like I've been doing the tracking stuff now for enough years that even just in cracking open dev tools and potentially not having access to the analytics yet, I have a good idea if something's actually broken or not. And I might even have an idea why. And another common thing is, okay, we have the WordPress like years and the wonder years of WordPress, we'll call it. And then React came out and every WordPress developer on the planet, maybe not everyone, but they got bored with WordPress and that React is cool, shiny new object. I'm going to put a React front end on this WordPress site. It's going to be so cool. And then in the dev communities, you're like out at a like brewery and you're talking to, and they're like, yeah, man, I put React on this WordPress site. It took me like 6 weeks to do it, but it's so cool. And then chances are that website, your analytics are going to be totally jacked up because it's got React on the front of it. If you have a marketing website, it usually needs to like you tell the customer what you do and why they would want to go with you. It doesn't need to have a little account thing that opens up that shows you the stats about your visit or something or whatever it happens to be. Like, it's not an app, it's just a website. So it's totally overkill to be putting React on a marketing site most of the time. I'm not going to say it's always overkill. But when you do that on the back end, when we're looking at the tracking and there's a button, and now instead of that button taking you to a link, which the browser recognizes, we can easily track, the button causes a new screen to appear. How do you know that happened? So I might say I'm gonna listen to clicks on that button, and there's ways that I can identify the button. And I go to do that, and I go to test it, and the things that seem to identify that button don't tell me that somebody clicked on it. And that's like commonly what happens is somebody's doing like a return false, or they have a function that gets triggered by the click, a JavaScript function or something that causes a new thing to load. And that function,
like an Ajax function or something like
yeah,
that, right? Where it's loading it something dynamically behind the scenes.
yep. And that function overrides the browser defaults. And the things that we would see that would allow us to track it
Can't see it.
can't see. And so that's where like the scenario that I may need to talk to your dev team to ask for a data layer push in certain situations. That's always the big thing that like can cause a project to take longer from a tracking perspective. If I can get in there, look at everything, and it all just tracks the way I expect it to, sweet. But if I need to talk to a developer and I need to ask for a data layer push,
or you have to create a tagging guide or something like that then they hand to their developer, and then it might take 2 weeks to get implemented in the sprint or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's funny enough, sometimes the developer will try to do the exact same thing that I was already trying to do in Tag Manager. So they'll put like an on-click event on the button that's supposed to fire a data layer push, but that doesn't work because their other code is overriding. So they'll be like, I put it in there, I don't know why it's not working. So you have to be able to understand that and communicate that to them. And then sometimes that opens up this other conversation, like, why does it matter if we track who clicks the button? And it's the whole other thing. It's like, all right, dude, I'm the guy that came in here to make the analytics work. That question is maybe one for your boss.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Listen, man, this has been fascinating. Again, this is going down a rabbit hole that I'm not the expert on analytics. I'm not the expert on GA4. I see the scuttlebutt online about it and everything else, but I just know on my own website, I tend to go to Clarity now versus GA full stop, because I find that having a lens on your website that your customers have, that's a very valuable thing. And I remember there used to be other tools. There used to be Clicktail and Hotjar and all sorts of other things, and heat mapping tools and all sorts of other things. But I find that literally session recording is like one of the best ways that you can look at your site through your customer's eyes and see. Obviously, if you're getting 100,000 visitors a day to your e-commerce website, you're probably not going to be able to watch 100,000 sessions a day. But the great thing about a platform like Clarity is you can filter by certain attributes of those sessions. So did they go to this page? Filter by duration, filter by URL, filter by certain actions. There is effectively segmentation you can do on those sessions. That means you can drill down to the ones where, okay, maybe there was a rage click, or maybe there was a JavaScript error. Show me all the sessions that had JavaScript errors, or show me all the sessions where they had a quick back, or show me all the sessions with pages where they bounced, or show me all. And so you can actually see in real time, or virtually real time, okay, this is the experience they had when they came to our website. And I think even if you are running something like Feedbackify or Campile or something like that, some sort of feedback tab on your website, I think sometimes being able to identify that back to a specific session on that URL, it can be useful, because you can cross-reference the time, the browser, the country, all that stuff from the Feedbackify form. If someone says, hey, I was on this page and this thing didn't work, or whatever it is, cool, I'd like to see what actually happened on that page and the lead up to that failure of that button or that function on the page or that add to cart or whatever it is. And if I can then go back and try to identify the corresponding screen session, then I can start to see, okay, maybe they did something weird a use case that we didn't think to ever cater for. And so I think, okay, they expanded this tab. Before they clicked on this button, they expanded this tab of information, which was collapsed, and that interaction between that expansion event and this click event, that doesn't work. It breaks for whatever reason. And so it allows you to do some technical analysis on what is working and what is not working on your website that with a pure analytics layer is really difficult to do. So yeah, a really fascinating conversation. If people want to get a hold of you and find out more about this whole analytics thing, GA4, some of the challenges they might be facing and identifying what's working, what's not on their website, I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile. I'll put a link to your website. But other than that, how do you like people to reach out and have a chat to you?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn. Just send me a message, say like deep dive audit or something, just so I know that you listen to the podcast. And then I'll be in touch to see how I can help, see if there's a tracking problem that I can solve for you. Also, just one last thing about Microsoft Clarity. My favorite metric in there is the rage clicks.
Yes, I love that. I don't know. I don't even know how they quantify that, but I love it.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's so funny. But yeah. Yeah, so LinkedIn, I know you got the link. You can also just search for Joshua Lauer on LinkedIn and yeah, send me a message, deep dive audit. I will get in touch, probably send you a calendar link and we can start a chat.
I love it. I love it. Listen, as we come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. Mr. Joshua Lauer from Lauer Creations, what is your question for me today?
What was the thing that prompted you to start podcasting?
Great question. There was multiple motivations, but I think the single biggest one for me was being able to speak to super interesting and smart people in our industry without it coming across as a sales pitch. Meaning that when you slide into someone's DMs, if I just randomly slid into your DMs and said, "Hey, Josh, I'd love to have a chat with you. Let's chew the fat. Let's talk shop. Here's a calendar link. Do you want to set up a time to have a convo?" 9 times out of 10, you're going to read that and you're going to go, okay, what is he trying to sell me? That's the assumption,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's not true, that's the assumption, right? Whereas when you have a podcast and you slide into someone's DMs and you say, hey, looks like you're doing some super interesting stuff in the industry. I'd love to host you on my e-commerce podcast. It's got nearly 500 episodes and I can send them to my podcast page with all the information about my podcast. And they see that it's like legit and it's not just a fly-by-night podcast and it's not just a thinly veiled sales pitch. I get a lot more yeses to that than I do, hey, let's schedule a virtual coffee for a chin wag, right? And so for me, being able to open those dialogues and create new relationships in the industry off the back of that, where there's a bit of a quid pro quo there, it actually benefits the person because it puts them on a bigger stage, it exposes them to maybe a new market or whatever it might be. I feel like that's a fair trade. Plus, for me, this industry's treated me super well. It's given me an amazing lifestyle for the last 25 years. I could never have imagined when I first got into this industry that I could make a really good living from this industry. I back in the day, it was questionable exactly where this whole internet thing was going to go.
Yeah.
And so I look at it as almost like my love letter back to the industry. And it's a opportunity for me to send the ladder back down again and share that knowledge with the wider world. That's probably the 2 biggest motivators for me.
Awesome. It's been great. I appreciate you having me on the show. I've enjoyed this conversation.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.